Curious for everyone in the room, have you ever heard of a scientific fact or story that was really confusing? Right? I love our scientists. They're, doing amazing work for the culture, but sometimes things can get really complicated. And oftentimes, even more than complicated, they can just be confusing. And so one of the things that our buddy Kyle at YouTube has been working on is how can we take some of these really complicated and really complex issues and make them compelling and engaging and interesting for audiences. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate. One of the things that I try to teach, sometimes better than others, is a way in which we can look at these large topics. We can look at numbers. When you hear the Earth is warming at 0.3, degrees Fahrenheit, like what does that mean, right? Or my son is doing a science fair project right now, looking at the way in which different volcanoes in Hawaii erupt, and what does that mean for not only that archipelago in the Pacific Ocean, but what does that mean for the people living on the Big Island or living in proximity in Maui or even in Kilo? And so asking all of these questions, but how can we use a platform like YouTube to explain, to share compelling, interesting, and also complicated stories? So let's see what Kyle has to say.
I think that science and environmental reporting does have a really long history on YouTube. But one thing I see in terms of a trend is that science channels and scientists and educators as well who are on YouTube and doing quite well, they're able to explain complex topics in relatable terms and then take that explanation and synthesis and connect it to people's everyday lives, right? And so you might be able to take something like nuclear fusion and be able to distill it down and say, okay, Frank, how is this helpful for the way that you live your life today? How might it explain why orange juice isn't as good the next day as when you first open it, right? And so I think this storytelling, right, of how do you take really complex, climate science as an example, and bring it down into somebody's day-to-day life of why, for example, Miami is sinking, right? I think there are really poignant ways that scientists and storytellers are blending that on YouTube and finding a really great vein of success and deep audiences. When you think about building audiences that will come back to have really complex conversations, that they need to trust you, right? They need to feel engaged. And so I think that the best way to do that is to get them as close as possible to the reporting. And that could be as easy as using some of the poll features, right, with community notes to say, what areas of climate science do you feel are most confusing or hard to understand, right? And then thinking about, okay, let's dig into that a little bit more, right? There's an age-old adage on YouTube that your next video is in the comments of your last video. And I think it's a little bit less making editorial decisions on high and actually getting down there in the weeds with your audience and trying to understand, what are they looking for? What do they really want? What are they missing?
And so, yeah, you can clap for Kyle. He's not here, but clap for him. We'll share your claps and applause. And so Kyle made a really good point, right? Like, your next story is often in the comments. And I also come from the culture of don't read the comments, but I think we can and we should. And that is where you can find out how that engagement is working. So we have our next panel coming up, and we're going to talk about what I refuse to everyone call it's vertical video. I hate that term. I don't know what else to call it, but I mean, it's accurate, but do we call everything else horizontal video? Like, has anyone really thought about that? I don't know, it drives me crazy, but I get it, because we're looking on our phones, right? Most of us are not turning our phones horizontally to engage, so vertical video until someone else comes up with something better is where we're at right now. And so we have big stories, short videos, and how do we really stop scrolling? What compels us to pause for a moment in the chaos of everyday life and the hustle and bustle as we're moving around? What do we engage with? What are we just taking a moment to stop? And so we have two amazing storytellers from NBC Universal. We have Abby and Ryan, and then we have my favorite, I'm just gonna call him my work husband, no shade to Molly, Dan Reed, who's at the Center for Climate Communication because he left me and he's at George Mason. So welcome.
It's my work life.
That's, I love you.
How are you?
Good.
Thank you.
Make a noise. Hi, I'm Dan. I'm at George Mason University. I'm part of the Center for Climate Change Communication there. I have two students here, though. Where are you? All right. So I teach Intro to Media Production at George Mason, and we have a vertical video assignment. And I think everyone thinks it's going to be the easiest assignment because it's 1 minute. I think often turns out to be the most difficult assignment because how do you tell a story in 1 minute? So that's what we're going to explore today. It's also part of StoryFest. So we have this social media category. We're growing in this area in our content here at Planet Forward. So if you're maybe not a senior or graduating, think about what you'll hear today from these experts and how you can incorporate that into your StoryFest entry for next year on vertical videos, okay? So the first one we've got here, this is Ryan Miller. He's an Emmy Award-winning meteorologist who joined Storm Team 4 in 2021. He covers weather throughout the week and contributes to the Science 4 Everyone's Stories on Air team and across digital platforms. So come on out, Ryan. Thank you. Also, I'm the son of a broadcast meteorologist, so it's a special pleasure to have one right here. All right, now we have Abby Vervaeke. I got it right, didn't I, Abby? Abby Vervaeke, so a DC-based journalist and coordinating producer on NBC News' short-form video team, where she helps lead strategy and production of vertical videos across social and direct-to-consumer platforms. Love to hear more about that. So let's dig in together. I wanted to ask everyone here first, though. I'm going to borrow from Frank's audience survey style. Raise your hand if you watched a vertical video today. Raise your hand if you watched a vertical video in the last hour. You shouldn't have been. All right. Raise your hand if you remember any detail from a vertical video you watched today. Yeah? I think that's actually one of the challenges with vertical videos. We're so used to looking at it and swiping and swiping and swiping. So I think the first critical thing when telling this type of story is that hook. And I've read that 3 seconds is really the hook. I think it's more like a second. But I'm curious, your thoughts. How do we get that hook, Ryan?
That hook, I think, in our world of weather or in science, comes from this notion of being authentic as fast as you can possibly be. Whether you establish that authenticity before in some capacity and then use it as leverage as you do more and more videos, I think you have to be approachable and you have to find a way to communicate in a form that makes the person that's watching your video think that they're next to you and not necessarily watching you on a device. I think those are two important parts.
Abby, the hook.
Yeah, I think you have to spark interest right away. I mean, what I tell our reporters when I'm producing them is that, especially on a platform like TikTok, we're competing against dogs and other funny videos and trying to get people to watch news. And so you really have to tell them something they don't know or give them a thought they might not have already had right away. And sometimes that means taking your most interesting fact that you might not want to give away right away on other platforms like broadcast and using that immediately for a vertical video.
Yeah. Knowing that we're competing against dogs and cats, how important is that human face as part of the hook?
Yeah, incredibly important. You want to establish relationships with people and get them to trust you. And if they don't see who's talking to them or know who they are, then you're going to struggle a little bit there. So you want to focus on relationship building, which also means focusing on consistency and loyalty and brand identity so that people know what to expect when they see that face.
Right.
And to compound this whole idea and notion of having to deliver something that grabs attention, you have to battle AI. And you have to go against sometimes jumping bunny rabbits on a trampoline that look great and cute, but it's not authentic, it's not reality. And there has to be some differentiation between yourself and what you're providing and what is out there through AI. There's a wonderful benefit to it in many ways, and there's also a curse that comes along with it.
Yeah. So in this AI era, let's talk a little bit more about authenticity. So human face, maybe that's one technique, but what are other ways to show that and reveal that authenticity? I feel like we often have the pattern too with social media just following trends. So when you're doing work for NBC, are you following trends, or are you telling original stories with your own sort of style or technique?
I think if there's a trend to follow, it's just, learning from how other people are telling stories, which might be, which types of visuals they're incorporating, where they're putting it on the screen, but not leaning into as much trending sounds or things like that, because we're not trying to post one-hit wonders, right? Where you have one video, one story that goes mega viral and you can never replicate it again. Yeah. You want to make sure that your storytelling is consistently reaching people and consistently informing people. And so to do that, you have to be authentic, you have to have your own style, even if it's totally different from another successful brand that you might see on social media. You're trying to build your own brand. And so I would think more about what that voice is. And you want to speak in a way that's casual and conversational so that people can connect with you, but also authoritative so that you're kind of making it clear why they should be listening to you, what your expertise is, and not some other person on the internet.
Yeah.
I have gone back to sidewalk chalk. I've found that I have a fair amount of success when I want to take something complex and I get the sidewalk chalk out, and in front of my house on the street or in the parking lot of our studios at NBC, I will try to diagram something out. We have every whistle and bell and tool and technology in the world to make graphics that are in 3D or 2D, and I think simplifying it with just a simple drawing on a street or on a sidewalk or on a parking lot provides that opportunity to relate to a lot of folks, whether they're older, whether they're younger, and I use that as my niche to try and get attention from that standpoint. I'm also a high school teacher. I've taught for 25 years now at the high school that's closest to here, but not in Washington, D.C. It's in Arlington at Washington Liberty. So I'm blessed in the sense of having a focus group of 17 to 18-year-olds every single day that can tell me and will tell me if I'm doing something successfully or if I'm not communicating in a way. And I think that has been such a benefit to the things that I'm able to do on television, because to have 30 critics in front of you that are willing to tell you everything that is wrong with the way you look, the way you sound, or the information you're presenting is a great way to try and refine your craft.
Sidewalk chalk.
Sidewalk chalk.
Sometimes it's really simple, right? What about a video that you've produced, Abby, that you thought would perform really, really well and then it didn't? What do you think was the reason why?
It's usually the hook. Or also, I think, overestimating maybe a certain interest in a topic. It's really important to get out of your own bubble sometimes and to do some digging in comments, to look around in things maybe like a Reddit thread, or just talk to people you know to figure out what questions they have about a story. Sometimes when you're so close to a story, you miss something because you've just been looking at it for too long. And so talking to people before you post something or produce something to kind of get that gut check is usually the solution there when something doesn't do well.
All right, let's go inside baseball and talk about production.
Okay.
So I know we have Kirsten from Adobe in the room, and I'm saying this just as an educator and believer in Adobe. I'm an Adobe Premiere Pro person when I make this type of content, but there are a ton of other production platforms now like CapCut, and you use
InShot.
Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit about your production process? Like, what platform are you using, and
Sure.
how do you do your editing?
I try not to edit. I do not like and despise the idea of editing, and being a meteorologist, you have to rely on your ability to ad-lib and to communicate without having a script or anything that's necessarily prepared in advance. So I try my very best to do a video in one shot, one take, very little editing, and try to capitalize on that. That cuts down on production time, obviously. I feel like the more I start messing with something, the more I screw it up, and then I'm really starting to nitpick, and I prefer to just try and go out one way, and if it doesn't work, try it again another way. Sometimes I do like to use other graphics or other things that can be inserted directly into a video quickly. The InShot that I was mentioning, it's an app. I didn't know it existed until a couple of months ago, and after a few minutes playing around with it, it's easy to use. And you can take your videos and you can export them as in the format that whatever is needed, and from there I'll usually send a video that I'll do directly to my social media platforms, but then also to our team that handles social media for NBC, and then they'll maybe do some touching up on it if they need to, and then they'll send it out through their channels. Yep.
Yeah, we do use Adobe Premiere, but I would encourage people to use whatever they have access to and focus more on the front end production. So knowing what you're going to say or what you want to say, making sure you have a clean shot and clean audio. Those things are always easier to perfect on the front end than to try to fix them in the back end, whatever platform you're using to edit. And so relying on those things and then using just whatever tools you have access to, whether that is Premiere and trying to learn that or something like InShot or CapCut. I know a lot of reporters use those for their own social media accounts. And so I think you can work with that to do it in any place to bring in visuals, bring in subtitles, things like that that'll make your video stronger.
So what tools are we using? Phones?
Phones.
Phones?
Phones and microphones.
What kind of
For
mics?
shooting. You can get like a wireless Rode mic or a DJI mic for relatively a couple $100, maybe something like that.
We need good cameras, good mics. We've got a variety of editing platforms. When we're editing, though, are we the final product? Are you at NBC planning just a video for TikTok,
No.
or is the video you're doing becoming a YouTube short and also Instagram Reel, all across the different vertical video?
Yeah, it goes everywhere. It goes Facebook, Threads, sometimes Reddit, TikTok, Instagram,
Facebook.
YouTube Shorts, Facebook, the NBC News app, all of those. So it's going a little bit of everywhere.
We have a room full of environmental storytellers. So if we're telling environmental stories specifically, what kind of advice do you have about language that we use or different approaches?
I would be as accessible as possible with your language. Don't overassume how much people know, kind of going back to that get out of your own bubble, take a step back for a second to see what might be the best way to explain something. And I always encourage people to explain one really specific thing very well and not try to explain a lot, which may mean if you're looking at a written story or a broadcast piece, what is one line in that story that you can turn into 60 seconds in your video? You're going to inform people and keep them interested by doing something like that rather than doing what I would call like an everything but the kitchen sink type of video where you're just packing things in but not explaining it very much.
Yeah, you're our science communicator. I've seen your climate and weather videos, so.
Simplify. We're dealing with topics that are so complex, and it's not 1 + 2 = 3. It's 1 divided by 0.05 times 18 divided by the square root of whatever else, and you can't possibly cover all of those things in a short period of time. And it's overwhelming, even for myself or for others. So I think it's a matter of getting ahead with something that's simple but also relatable to everybody's life. For example, we were talking earlier, if I am going to be doing a video later this week, there are any number of things you can do on climate change. So what I'm going to focus on is, all right, well, climate change is a result of what? And a result of this and that. We're using energy, and we're not using energy wisely, whether it's for transportation or whether it's for electricity production. And so let's think about something that we could do in this room, all of us, quickly, that could cut down or reduce our energy consumption. And I did this with my students. Simply check your tires, the air pressure on your tires, and realize that if you have a tire that's properly inflated, you're going to be using less gasoline if it's a gasoline engine, or you're using less electricity if it's a motor. Those are simple things that most folks don't do, or they're challenged by the notion of even checking the air pressure on their tires. So I'll do a quick video on Sidewalk Chalk talking about why an underinflated tire contributes to inefficient use of energy. And then I'd probably finish it up with, oh, by the way, today's going to be 96 degrees, and that will be the official high temperature and record high temperature we've ever recorded in Washington, D.C. And then end it like that.
That sounds like an idea for a vertical video.
Yeah.
I told you I'm the son of a broadcast meteorologist. I've never met a group of people better at ad-libbing and doing things in one take than that. So I wonder, would you do a vertical video for us?
Absolutely.
Right now?
Sure.
On stage?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What's the story?
Let's talk about the urban heat island effect. Cities are obviously a lot hotter than the surrounding suburbs and rural areas. And you want me to do it myself with my phone?
You tell us.
Sure, I'll do it this way. So what I would do, you get the microphones, the wireless mics that you would use, and they're easily attainable. I would plug my mic in, I would put it onto my shirt. We get these studies and these recommendations from folks that do a lot of social media that you need to hold the microphone because that's what the influencers are doing. Don't listen to that stuff. You do you. Flip the mic on and be authentic. Don't worry about holding the mic so that you can replicate, a social media influencer. So I would take my phone and I would set it up. Obviously, you want to make sure you're either using one way or the other. If I'm going to do a sidewalk chalk thing, I might just emphasize, or what I'll do is get a thermometer. And I would say, if you can just imagine with me for a moment, because I don't have all the tools in the toolbox. I hit the video, I get it going. Wait a few seconds, and if you're doing a vertical video, I have this habit, and everybody does. Don't, and then start going, because you're gonna be picking that up, or click your mouth or do something like that. So be mindful of the fact that you wanna start almost with an open mouth, and you're not going to create a sound, or you can also edit it out, but between that sound you make and starting the video is already a short period of time and it's hard to edit. So I get the phone going. I might start with a thermometer on the ground and I'll have my video pointed at that. Thermometer that is, for example, on a surface that is concrete or asphalt. You can see the temperature right there. And I'd say, well, right now, here we are with a temperature currently of 95 degrees. This is in the shade, but on an impermeable surface. That's where water can't get through. I'm meteorologist and science teacher Ryan Miller. Let's talk about the idea of our urban heat island, where cities are a lot hotter than what we see in the suburbs. And as an example of that, I'm going to go from this thermometer right here that is on top of a concrete surface over to this shadow in this thermometer that is underneath a tree on a surface that is natural with grass. Look at the difference in temperature. It goes from 95 degrees right here on this platform in this concrete to a temperature that is 20 degrees cooler in the shade. We need green space, and we need to include more of it in our cities. That'll help reduce the urban heat island effect and make everybody a little bit more comfortable. Whoa. Wait, and it's done. Always give yourself a few seconds at the end. Don't just take your phone and put it down. Give it a second. That way you can just trim off anything off the backside of it.
Amazing. We'll do it live.
We'll do it live.
All right, I think we have a video from you, Abby.
Yeah, we can play that if it's up there. It was an example of a pretty niche story that we turned into something that did very well on TikTok.
Perfect.
Republican James Comer is investigating former President Biden's use of an auto pen. Comer himself has been using a digital signature to send letters as part of his investigation. An auto pen is a device that replicates someone's signature. Variations of it have been around for decades, and Biden has denied that it's any sign that he wasn't in control of his administration. But documents show that some of the letters and subpoena notices sent out by Comer were signed using a digital signature similar to an auto pen. In other words, Comer didn't sign these letters himself.
Presidents use the auto pen just like I use an auto pen to sign correspondence to the massive amounts of messages that you get. But no one uses an auto pen for legal documents.
We learned about Comer's digital signatures by taking a look at the metadata in his letters. You can see that they were created by someone other than Comer, and that Comer's signature was a digital image. Now, to be clear, there is precedent for sending letters with a digital signature like this, and there is precedent for it happening both in Congress and in the White House by members of both parties. What President Trump and his allies are trying to do here is undermine Joe Biden and his policies by pointing to a tool that they themselves use on a regular basis. And at this point, the Comer investigation has not revealed any specific document that would provide evidence that Joe Biden didn't know what he was doing while in office. All that being said, President Trump is still very focused on this issue.
The auto pen, I think, is maybe one of the biggest scandals that we've had in 50 to 100 years.
So obviously our style is a bit different than what we did on stage, but the thing I wanted to emphasize with this video is bringing your reporting process into it as a way to show why you're the person speaking on this, to show kind of how the sausage gets made. So we're watching Ryan there over the shoulder of his computer. Obviously you need someone else to film that. But like looking at the document, talking about what he saw, what he noticed, how this reporting happened. And I think that's a great way to kind of break down the wall, invite people in, you know, show them how you reach this conclusion. It helps build trust, helps build accessibility. And it's something to just think about of when you're writing a script or when you're deciding to do this video, not just what the outcome of the reporting was, but how you made it happen. And that's very interesting to viewers often and helps build the trust.
Would you call this long-form vertical video?
I wouldn't, but I would say the thing we think about is less of how long it is start to finish and more the order of the information. So I know that people are probably going to drop off after the first 20 seconds, right? So in theory, I want to start with a hook that gets them to stay. I want to give them enough information at the top so that even if they scroll away, they've learned something and they're not leaving the video more confused than they were before they watched it. But I'm going to keep putting stuff at the end so that if someone wants to watch it to the end, they can and they'll keep learning versus, you know, making it shorter or an awkward cutoff just because I want to keep it to a tight 60 when that's not a restriction of the platform anymore.
Yep. So whether it's 1 minute or 3 minutes, the story still matters.
The story still matters, and you just want to think about the flow of the information that you're providing, even providing like a mini hook after 30 seconds to get someone to keep watching, thinking about how you're structuring the order there.
Great. How can we follow you? What's your?
Geez, I don't even. Caught me
put
off
you on
guard
the
there.
spot.
Wait a minute here. It's at Miller Weather on Instagram. I try just use that basically, and sometimes on TikTok it's the same thing.
Great.
Miller Weather.
Yeah, we'll find you there.
Yeah.
And then at?
It's usually Abby J. Vervaeke on LinkedIn or
Cool.
other platforms as well.
Awesome. So here you go. You've met Abby and Ryan. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Awesome. Whoop.